Hello everybody, this is Gareth Cahoon Speaks back here with another video. I'd like you to hit the subscribe bar, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, or hit the notification bell to be notified when I post my next post. Or otherwise you can donate to my ministry and the charities that I support at garethcahoon3@gmail.com on PayPal. Or if you'd like to see some of the videos that have been banned on TikTok, you can look up my YouTube account at Gareth Cahoon Speaks and hit subscribe and like my videos there. It would be greatly appreciated. This one here is about from Restorationism to Zionism, the Christian roots of support for Israel. In 1896, Theodor Herzl walked into the home of Reverend William Heckler in Vienna, Austria, and was bewildered by what he saw. The room was lined with Bibles from floor to ceiling. Heckler showed him charts and maps and played Zionist songs on his organ, which he had composed himself. I take him for a naive visionary with a collector's enthusiasm. Herzl later wrote in his diary, a year and a half later, Heckler would become a guest of honour at the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. That meeting was more than just a curious encounter between a Jewish journalist and an eccentric Protestant minister. It was a meeting between Christian and Jewish Zionism, two different Zionisms with different histories, converging at the perfect moment in this article. I want to go back in time to show you where it all began, because modern Christian Zionism didn't materialize out of thin air. It was an activation of a much older, deep-seated theology called Christian nationalism. Christian Restorationism. Restorationism is the belief that one day the Jews will return to the land of Israel, while Zionism is the active attempt to make it happen. In Judaism, a longing for Zion and faith that it will one day happen has always been a part of the religion, while active Zionism is a child of the 19th century. In Christianity, both Restorationism and Zionism developed slightly differently, often coupled with philo-Semitism, which is it's the opposite from anti-Semitism. If you were living in the 1800s, you wouldn't have been called a Christian Zionist, you would have been called a philo-Semitist, a favourable attitude towards the Jews. But let's not be naive. Christian support for Jewish restoration was not always philo-Semitic. It often had a snooty, paternalistic attitude or reduced the role of the Jews to a more apocalyptic expectations. Before the Reformation, mainstream Christianity was dominated by replacement theology, which is the lie that the Gentiles have replaced Israel in the promises of God. The belief that the church has replaced Israel in God's promises. Every time they saw Israel negatively in the Bible, they interpreted it about the Jews, and every time they saw it positively, they interpreted it as about the church. This was unquestioned. The Reformation did not immediately change this. Martin Luther and John Calvin both rejected the idea of a future Jewish kingdom, but something important shifted. People started reading the Bible as is. Protestants returned to the Hebrew Bible, studied Hebrew, and read the prophets more literally. Once Christians began reading passages about Israel in their original texts, cracks slowly began appearing in the original context. Cracks slowly began appearing in the cemented replacement theology. Occasionally, radical voices even suggested openly that the Jews would one day physically return to their land. One such preacher Frank's cat was burned at the stake in 1589 because he believed in Zionism. But then the Puritans showed up and began interpreting the Bible literally. Thomas Brightman from 1562 to 1607 was pivotal, but he dared publish his views on the end times only posthumously, as Henry Fitch, 1558 to 1625, wrote that all nations would one day become subservient to Israel, and was imprisoned by King James for what he said. With the Civil War and the rise of Oliver Cromwell, the Puritans were no longer censored. Now, Restorationism started to gain traction in 1649. There was even a Baptist petition asking the state of England to make it happen, to restore the Jews to the land of Israel. The Puritans had injected the idea of a literal return of the Jews to Israel into the bloodstream of English Protestantism. But proto-Zionism, thoughts on actual activism, like in 1649, were rare. Restorationism was chiefly a theological issue, a specific belief about what the end times would look like. The end times timeline of the Puritans often included all Jews coming to faith in Jesus first, and then God would bring them to Israel. But then the American Puritan increased Mather, 1639 to 1723, scandalously suggested reversing the timeline. He said in 1969 that the Jews might be restored to Israel first and come to faith in the Messiah later. This was a revolutionary idea and it got a lot of pushback. One of his critics was Richard Baxter, actually said, "What about the rights of the current native population of Palestine?" This might have been the earliest foreshadowing of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This did not occur in a vacuum. The 1660s, and especially the scary-looking year 1666, were filled with expectations about the end times among both Jews and Christians for various geopolitical reasons. Around the same time, the false messiah Shabbatai Zevi gathered Jewish followers from all over the world, and his Rabbi Nathan of Gaza, made the city of Gaza the Jewish centre of this Shabbatian movement before it disintegrated. Spoiler alert, the end times did not occur in the 17th century, but as the 1700s rolled along, Restorationism had become a recognisable and increasingly respectable Protestant theological position, and not something that would get you burned or imprisoned. John Gill, 1697 to 1771, wrote specifically that the Jews would be restored to Israel, assisted by Protestant princes, yet it was still just an end times idea and hadn't morphed into active Zionism. That changed in 1799. Come back for part 2 of this video. Shalom, Maranatha, and Hallelujah.